Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel and to a new video. So we looked already on the channel how we can install Arch Linux with the BTRFS file system, Timeshift or Snapper. We installed recently Fedora 34 with its BTRFS file system and Snapper and taking snapshots. And in this video we are going to do fairly the same thing using Ubuntu. So we're going to install Ubuntu here with the BTRFS file system. We are going to install Timeshift and we are going to make sure that we can take snapshots of the system and that those snapshots are available also on the GRUB bootloader. So without further ado, let's jump here into the machine. And here I am on a virtual machine. It's already booted up, so I can start here the installer. And it's going to take a moment here to boot up. There is always a file system check here on the Ubuntu ISO, and the check is finished. So we should boot up now into the live ISO where we have the choice whether to install the system or to use the live installation. And we're going to use the live install because we need to go into the terminal. So there you go. Now the machine is booting up. And here we are in the Ubuntu 2010 ISO. So I'm going to click here, try Ubuntu. And it's going to close the Ubiquiti installer here and go full screen on the live ISO. It's going to take a moment to do this. There you go. So what we need to do here, we need to go into the terminal because before starting the installer, we need to actually partition the disk manually, set some things in the partitioner and also in the installer, and then we can finish the installation using the Ubiquiti installer. So it is a little bit of work, and this is just one way on how you can do that. But if you want to use Timeshift with the BTRFS file system, you can definitely follow along. So I would say, let's go ahead and open up here our terminal. And let me actually also first open up the settings because I need to set here my keyboard layout. So let me go here to region and language, and I'm going to add here the Swiss keyboard. So I'm just going to type in here Switzerland, and I'm going to select this one here with no keys and click add. There you go. So I can select the keyboard from here, and now I can go full screen and increase the font sizes. Okay. So let me type in here lsblk. Now you can see here we have our ISO here, and we have also our disk. This is the virtual machine disk VDA, which is 60 gigabytes. Now this is a UEFI machine, and I'm going to show you how you can do this on a UEFI machine. On MBR, of course, the partitioning is going to be a little different because you don't need to have actually an EFI partition. You can just create, if you wish, a swap partition, a home partition, and a root partition, which is mandatory. And then you can install the bootloader on the disk, which I'm going to show you later when we start the Ubiquiti installer. However, if you have a UEFI machine, like in this case, you need to create also an EFI partition. So I'm going to use gdisk to do this because it's going to create automatically GPT labels. So I'm going to switch to the root user first by typing in sudo and then -i and clean up the terminal. And now I can type in gdisk/dev/vda. So you can see here creating new GPT entries. So let's create the first partition, which is going to be the EFI partition. So N for new, partition number 1 is fine. First sector is also fine. The last sector defines the size. So for the EFI partition, I'm going to go here with 500 megabytes or maybe bytes, better said. And the code for this partition, it's EF00. So EFI system partition. And next I'm going to create a swap partition. So N for new. Partition number 2 is fine, first sector is fine, and for the last sector I'm going to go with this partition with 2 gigabytes, and the code is 8200 for the swap. And you can see that it changed the partition type to Linux swap. Now I'm going to create the last partition, the root partition. I'm not going to create a home partition because later in the BTRFS file system we're going to have anyway a home subvolume. So let's do this by typing in N for new, and I'm going to accept here all the defaults as well also for the code, and then W to write the changes to the disks, and then Y to confirm. So it's going to take a moment to do that, and the operation has completed successfully. So lsblk again. And you can see we have there VDA1, VDA2, and VDA3. Now, the only thing what we need to do here, we need to format VDA1 with the FAT file system, because if we don't, then we are not going to be able to mount this partition in the Ubiquiti installer. So let me format VDA1 by typing in mkfs.fat-f32. So we're going to use the FAT file system, of course, because it's a EFI partition. And then the partition path is /dev/vda1 and hit enter. Now, before we proceed using the installer, we need to make sure that the installer is going to set the correct mount options for the butterfest file system, and that also the fstab file is going to properly be configured when we reboot the machine. So to do this, we need to edit two files, which are going to make sure that the ubiquiti installer is going to do that. Now, let me clean up the terminal here, and let's type in nano/user/lib/partman/mount.d and then 70 BTRFS, and then hit enter. Now, this is basically the file which is going to take care of the mount options for the BTRFS file system when we reboot the machine. And we need to change some of these to make sure that we have the ones that we want to have. So the first one is, if we go down here to this line, you can see here we have the options parameter, and this is going to set the options for the root subvolume, which is going to be created in Ubuntu automatically. Now, to this option subvol equal @mark, which is the root subvolume, I want to add also some other options. Now, the BTRFS file system should recognize actually if you have an SSD and should be able to add this option automatically as it does on Arch. So I'm not going to add it here anyway because this is a virtual machine, and if you have an SSD, probably it's going to be automatically added anyway. But I want to add some other options here. First is the noatime option. And again, the noatime option just makes sure that there are not too many read and write operations, especially if you're accessing file very often. So it's good to have this option because it's going to improve performance. And the next option is the space cache. And here I'm going to use just the version 1 because it's a very small drive. I'm going to use, of course, also the compression option. And I'm going to use ZSTD for this one. And if you have an SSD, what you can add also is the discard equal async, which is going to improve also the performance of your SSD. So this is for the root subvolume. Now I want to do the same also for the home subvolume, which is normally going to be created in Ubuntu, which is down here in the second paragraph, where you can see here we have the root subvolume options and the home subvolume options. So I'm going to do exactly the same here. So I'm going to add here noatime, and I'm going to add also space cache. And I'm going to add also compress equal ZSTD, and also discard equal async. Now again, this is a virtual machine, so I could not put actually this option here, but as a demo, I'll just add it. And if you have an SSD, you can add it as well. So this is it for this file. So we can save and exit here with Control-O and enter, and Control-X to exit. Now, the second file we'll need to edit is the one that makes sure that we have the mount points also set with the correct options in the fstab file. So we need to edit that file. So let's type in nano/user/lib/partman/fstab.d/butterfest, and then hit enter. So the first thing, I'm going to search here for home_options and hit enter. And you can see them right there. So the first thing I'm going to do here is to change the path to 0. And then I'm going to change the options here exactly the same way we did with the other file. So I'm going to add here noatime, and then space cache, and then compress equal ZSTD. And I'm going to add also discard equal async. And let me make actually the fonts a little smaller so that it stays in one line. There you go. Now we are going to repeat also the same thing here for the root subvolume, which is just one line under. So I'm just going to go here and add the same thing. So noatime, comma space cache, compress equal ZSTD, and we have also discard equal async. There you go. Now we're going to do the same here for the mount point home. So I'm going to go here and change this path also to 0. And for the options, I'm going to do exactly the same. So, comma, noatime, and then space cache, and then compress equal ZSTD, and then also discard equal async. Then we need to change also this path option here to 0. And then I'm going to search for the last thing here with the echo. So echo double quote $home and hit enter. And as you can see there, we have this command. So this is going to set also the file system checks for the butterfest file system, which should be 0. So we're going to change this 2 to 0. And then we can save the file and exit the nano editor. So Control O and enter, and Control X. There you go. So now we are ready to start the Ubiquiti installer. So we'll just type in here Ubiquiti and then hit enter. Now it's going to take a moment here to start the installer, and there you go. So we can select the language here. This is okay, it's English, so we can continue. And the keyboard layout here, again, I'm going to select the same keyboard I'm using here, which is the Swiss keyboard. And I'm going to select this one with no dead keys. And then I'm going to select here the normal installation, and I'm not going to download third-party software. This is just a demo, but if you need to do that, go ahead and do that, of course. So I'm just going to click continue here. And next we should be greeted by the partitioning of the disk. So there you go. So here we need to select something else and click continue. Now here you can see we have already our partitions. So VDA1 is our EFI system partition, which has already been formatted. We have VDA2, which we need to define actually as a swap. So we can click this and click here swap area and then click OK. Now we can select VDA3, click change, and then we can select here the butterfest file system and format the partition. As a mount point here, we are going to select the root file system and then click OK. And the last thing I need to do here is to check the device for the bootloader installation. Now, if you have a legacy system, the device is actually VDA, it's the whole disk. But if you have an UEFI machine, you need to select here the VDA1 partition, because that's the EFI partition and the bootloader needs to be installed there. So we can select, in our case, the VDA1 partition here and then click install now. Now this is a summary and we can just click continue. So now the installer will install the system, and we can go through here the rest of the things we need to do. So we can just select here the time zone, which is fine in my case. So I'm just going to click continue here, and I'm going to create a user. I'm going to type in my name here. I'm going to call the computer here Ubuntu BTRFS. The username is fine. I'm just going to give it a password and retype it. And I require the password to log in, so that's fine. And I can click continue. So basically now we just have to wait until the installation is done. So I will pause the video here, guys, and I'll be back with you when it's finished. So here we go. The installation is now finished. So we can click restart now to reboot our machine. And then we will check if everything is in place. So I need to remove here the ISO, and the machine is now booting up. You can see there we have our installation. So I can just hit enter here and we should be able to boot just fine. So you can see here, this is my username, so I can enter my password here and hit enter. We should be greeted now by the Ubuntu desktop. There you go. So I'm just gonna skip these steps here. Just gonna click next and done. There you go. So let's open up the terminal and check if everything is okay. So let me actually increase the font size here, and let me type in sudo BTRFS subvolume and then list on the root file system. I need, of course, to authenticate. And as you can see there, we have our two subvolumes. So the root subvolume and the home subvolume. Now, if I type in cat/etc and fstab, and let me make this a little smaller, you can see here we have our subvolumes with the mount points and the options that we defined before. So everything looks good here. So the first thing I want to do is to update the system. This is very important just to have the latest packages available. So sudo apt update and hit enter. It's going to take a moment first to check for the updates in the repositories, and I'm pretty sure that we have quite a lot of these. As you can see, there are 247 packages. So we can run now sudo apt dist upgrade, and let's install all of these packages. These are important because I want to make just sure that the packages are all up to date. And then I'm going to reboot one last time the machine, and then we can install all the packages we need for our BTRFS file system. So I'm going to now pause the video here, guys, because this is going to take a minute or two, and I'll be back with you when it's done. So there you go, guys. The system is now up to date. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to reboot one time just to make sure that the system is up and running with the latest packages. So it's going to take a moment here to boot up again. And here it's starting up. So let's select Ubuntu here. And let's wait for a second here until we see the login screen. There you go. So I can enter my password. And now we should be back in the desktop. There you go. So let's open up again our terminal. And again, I'll go full screen here and increase the font size. So let's install Timeshift. So let's type in sudo apt install Timeshift and then hit enter. I need to, of course, authenticate. And as you can see, Timeshift is now installing. So this is going to take actually a moment. It's not a big package. There you go. And Timeshift is installed. So let me actually close the terminal and let's open up Timeshift just to make sure that we configure it the first time. So I need to authenticate here and I'm going to select here butterfest and click next. And I'm going to select the disk here and click next again. The schedule is going to be fine for me. Of course, you can change this to your liking. I'm going to click next here. I'm going to enable the queue groups and I'm not going to include the home subvolume. So I'm going to click next here and click finish. And there you go. We have here our Timeshift up and running. We can take a snapshot here. And here we have our snapshot. We can also choose here to browse it, or we can also delete it. Let me just delete this anyway. And there you go. So let's close this and open up Firefox. So what we need to do now, we need to install two packages that are going to be used for one, taking snapshots when we update the system, and two, making sure that we see those snapshots when we boot the machine from the GRUB bootloader. So let's search for those packages. So the first one is timeshift-autosnap /apt and hit enter. And let me just here select the language and I will click on the first link here. This is the GitHub project of the package. So I'm just gonna keep it open here. And the second one is of course grub-butterfest, which is also here on the first link. And I'm gonna keep these both open. Just gonna make the window a little larger. So what we are going to do here, we need to install first some packages so that we can download these repositories. So let me open up shortly the terminal here and let me increase the font size and let's type in sudo apt install. And I'm gonna install butterfest-prox if it's not already installed. I'm gonna install also git and also make and then hit enter. Need to, of course, authenticate. And I need to install the packages, so this is not going to take too long. I can see now it's installing Git. So this is going to take maybe a couple of seconds. I'm just going to skip this through and be back with you guys in a second. And there you go, so the packages are installed. So let's actually go back to the browser. And I'm going to go here to the first package, which is the Timeshift-autosnap apt. So you can see already from the name, this is basically going to make sure that a snapshot is going to be taken every time you make an update to the system. So I'm gonna go here to code and copy the address here, go back to the terminal, clean it up and maybe make it a little smaller and go full screen and type in here git clone, and then I'm gonna paste in the link with Ctrl+Shift+V and hit enter. Now I'm gonna move into the repository here with cd and then timeshift-autosnap apt, and now I can type in sudo make install and then hit enter. Now let's do the same also for the other repository while we are at it. So let me get out here of the terminal, go back to Firefox here and copy the same way I copied the first package here. I'm gonna copy grub-butterfest. I'm gonna go back to the terminal here, make full screen and type in git clone and copy and paste in the content and hit enter. And again, I'm gonna move in there. So cd and then grub-butterfest. And again, I'm gonna run sudo make install. Exactly the same way. And this is also done. So let's go back here and clean up the terminal. Now there is a small change that I want to do in the grub-butterfest configuration file. So to do this, I'm going to type in sudo nano/etc/default/grub-butterfest and then config and hit enter. And the change I'm going to make here, because by default it's going to say Arch Linux snapshots, I'm just going to uncomment this line and replace this with, you guessed it, Ubuntu snapshots. And then I can save this file and exit nano. Now we can check once if the configuration is working. So we can type in sudo timeshift-autosnap-apt and hit enter. And as you can see there, it's searching for everything. Everything looks good here. We have a snapshot already taken. So what we can try now, we can try to update our system or to install a package. So for example, let's try to install neofetch. So sudo apt install neofetch. and hit enter. So let's install it by hitting Y here. As you can see, it's creating already a snapshot before the installation, and then it should create also another one after the installation. So let's wait for neofetch here to finish installing, which is not going to take too long. And there you go. And let's open up actually Timeshift. So let me minimize here the browser because I don't need it for now. So Timeshift, and need to authenticate. And as you can see, we have the two snapshots, one before the installation and one after the installation. Now let's close this and reboot once our machine to see if these snapshots are also showing up on the GRUB bootloader. So let's go here to the menu and click restart and restart our machine. So it's going to take a moment here to start up. And if everything went well, we should see another menu. You can see there we have Ubuntu snapshots. So if we go in here, you can see we have our snapshots here available. But anyway, this is all there is to it for this video here. We installed Ubuntu with the BTRFS file system. As I said, it requires a little bit more work because we need to install it from the terminal, and then we can run the installer, mount the options, and then configure the system. So if you try this out, let me know in the comments below how it's working for you, or if you have any question about the video, let me also know in the comments below. As you know, I answer you as soon as I can. And if you want to support my work, you can always do so by becoming a patron. As you probably already know, I'm doing on Patreon also a live webinar every month with my patrons, and we are focusing on a topic about Linux. Or if you want, you can also donate via PayPal through my website as well. Thank you so much for watching the video, guys. I really appreciate that, and I'll see you very soon in the next one.